Alrighty. So, guys, I need everybody back into Photoshop again with the Castle guy. The Castle guy. Oh. Yeah, well, Joe's late. If you need to get out of, what are you in right now?
I'm
in the select and refine space.
Hit escape.
Hit escape or hit cancel at the bottom. I just want to make sure everybody's back so we can sort of start. We're going to go right back into it, but I just want to make sure everybody's sort of like back in this page part of it all. So if you select on the mask to make sure that that part is active, and then again, either select the select and mask here or up to the select menu down to select and mask, either one. You go into a completely separate workspace. This is the select and mask workspace. And your image may not look a whole lot different to you being in this workspace, but I want to give you sort of a quick tour of what's going on in here. A couple of the additions that they have, some of this is a direct carryover from what used to be the refine mask space, but they've added some things to it. So the things that they've actually added to this, the first one is this view, the thing that you're actually looking at. So if you click on this drop-down view menu right here, you'll see that there's a thing called the onion skin. This is actually new. This is one of the big new things that actually happened to this. And if you click on onion skin, it's on by default. What you'll see, in my case, the image, you can't really see anything, but what'll happen is if you take this transparency slider, and if you crank it all the way up in one direction, it completely dissolves the mask. If you take it all the way in the other direction, it dissolves it in the other direction. This starts to be really difficult for me to see, and it's probably not the best thing for us. We're going to do a different image to show you how the onion skin actually works. So we're not going to work in that guy right now. Typically, when you're in this dialog box, the space that you want, or the view that you want to have, is not onion skin if you've already got a mask going. If you don't have anything going, then onion skin definitely helps you, but we don't have anything going yet. So instead, I'm going to click on this drop-down menu, and I'm going to come down to on layers. It doesn't matter because we're changing the view altogether. So on the view, we're actually dropping down to on layers, and you lose transparency. It's not there anymore. So in the view, what you end up having is that when you do view on layers, what the preview window now is showing you is your composite. It's showing you the top layer, which is the sky that's been masked off, and the bottom layer, which is the ground that's actually being revealed. If you, the keyboard command shortcuts for the zoom tool are the same here in this dialog box as they are in Photoshop. If you hold down the space bar and you add the command key, you get the magnifying glass, and you can click in and you can look to see the problem that we've actually got with this mask. It's this edge right here. You can see there's another problem right here with the castle. There's another problem right here. You can see there's this white line around it. But what else do you see on this castle that is also a problem? Say what? Yes, you spot chromatic aberration, which is a problem. So before we actually fix this mask, we're going to cancel out of here. Now, if you were working with a baked file, you would not have gotten rid of this chromatic aberration, but we're not. We're working with smart objects now. So if you double click on this first smart object to go back into Camera Raw, and then you click on the lens correction up here at the top, you can actually click on remove chromatic aberration. Do not do that yet. I want you to actually zoom into the castle. Typically to see chromatic aberration, and I'm just zooming into this edge, you need to be at 400%. That's why in this drop-down menu, look at my screen to see where I'm talking about. This drop-down gives you percentages. Most people trying to spot chromatic aberration will go to 400%, and you can see that green line that's running right down there, and you can see the magenta line that's running on the opposite side, and that's typically how you spot chromatic aberration. It'll be one of two things, and ironically, it goes back to this exact same LAD issue. you end up with two possibilities in chromatic aberration. You end up with a green magenta, but you also end up with a blue yellow. In our case, we're doing green magenta in this one, and you'll notice that the green is happening where you really spot chromatic aberration at very really contrasty edges. That's where you spot it. But what you'll also notice is that the green is always on the, where this edge is, it's always sitting on the right side of, when you're going from light to dark, it's sitting on what we would call the left side of the dark edge. But on the right side of the dark edge, you have the magenta, you've got the opposite, and you can spot it here again. The green is on this side, the magenta is on this side. You can see it all the way around the sky. If you click on the remove chromatic aberration, that is eliminated. Yay. And say okay to that. It's not the only place we need to do it. We need to do it again in the smart object that's up here. Yes? It's, again, it probably is there. It's hard to say. You need to look at the real. I'll take a look here on this one. Actually, let me fix it on this one, and then I'll go back to the other one. We'll take a look at it. So again, clicking on the FX part right here, click on remove chromatic aberration, and go ahead and say OK. That removes it for this smart object. Back in and take a look at Alicia's question right here. And I'm going to zoom into this guy at 400%. And I'm going to uncheck chromatic aberration here to bring it back. And you're right, I don't see it here. I'm probably picking up some of it right here. It's just where it's falling on the lens. So possibly this is more the center of the lens. That would be a good guess. So the center of the lens, you're less likely to run into this than you are in the edges. It's just like vignetting, especially with wadding the lenses. As stuff starts moving to the edges, the lenses begin to fail. They get worse and worse. So anyway, that would be a good guess, but anyway. Okay, so I'm clicking on remove chromatic aberration. I'm going to say okay to that. I'm going to click on the mask again that's on the sky layer, go back into the select and mask dialog box. And again, the spot, I can spot it right in here. Now, my chromatic aberration fix actually helped this guy out a little bit, but that's probably because the mask itself is now incorrect. Again, it was made when we did the quick selection tool, it did it when that chromatic aberration existed. So to fix that, I'm going to cancel out of here one more time, and I'm going to throw this mask away. I'm going to show you guys, again, how to do this in the select and mask workspace. So I'm simply throwing the mask away. I'm going to double click on the hand again to get this as big as it can be, and so I can actually still see things. But instead of trying to use the quick selection tool here, that is one of the big changes, is that they actually enabled the quick selection tool inside select and mask. So again, I'm going to go up to the select menu, make sure that you do have the top layer, the sky layer is what is active, up to the select, down to select and mask. And you'll come in right now to the select and mask layer with the view now set to onion skin, which is what it always defaults back to. If you look over here on the left-hand side now, you'll see that you've got a tool palette. The very top tool is the quick selection tool. It's exactly the same thing. So this is the quick selection tool right here. The tool underneath this is the Refine Edge tool, which comes from Refine Edge, where that actually used to be. The tool underneath this is actually just a straight, hardcore, down and dirty brush tool. The one under that is now you have the lasso tool in here as well, and then you always have the hand tool and the magnifying glass tool. So now if you select the top one, you will also notice that there's an option set up here. The option set up here has actually got a plus and a minus. This again is just how you would you want to use the quick selection tool. If the quick selection tool overdoes your selection, you can use the minus quick selection tool to get closer to the way you would actually like it to be. So in our case here, we do not have the advantage of using the contrast by turning off that sky layer. So we'll see how the quick selection tool works here. We may cancel and go right back out and do it start it in Photoshop and then come back into this. But we'll see how this guy does. So I'm going to click and I'm going to start to select down. And you will notice that the sky actually changes color. And the reason it changes color is this onion skin. What the onion skin is trying to do is to actually show you the selection process. So I'm going to Command Z to undo. Well, it's not going to let me undo that. So I'm going to see if this will reset the way it normally. No, none of this dialog box works the way it actually should. I'm going to hit the Reset Workspace tool. It's the little reverse arrow down at the bottom. With the transparency set all the way down, so you don't want to do it all the way down. Yeah, no, I'm going to do it all the way up. With the transparency set all the way up to 100%, now using the quick selection tool, you can actually get a visualization of what is being selected. This is the way the onion skin is supposed to work. So you can now see that with this thing cranked all the way up. If you crank the transparency slider all the way down, it completely hides that selection. If you've got an image where things are really a distinct difference in background and foreground, this onion skin thing tends to work a little bit better. It seems to be a little bit more obvious. But at any rate, in my case, we're changing how this is going to be anyway. So I'm going to click again on View, the drop-down menu, and I'm going to come down to On Layers, and this shows me what the composite is using the mask that has been built so far right here. So again, I'm going to zoom in to look at this edge right here, and you can see that not the best job has been done. There's part of, I can see part of the grass has not been picked up in this guy right here. That's a problem right here. Around the castle part is actually pretty good. To get to the temporary hand, you simply hold down the space bar, which will let you drag it along. I've got some area of the mask that's above the trees. Part of this is working, part of this is not. I've got some white stuff that's actually happening there that doesn't look all that good to me. And then there's a white line that's running up along. I call these things the sand dunes. I really don't know what they are. But this thing in the background, that does not look correct to me. That actually looks problematic to me as far as sort of like what I can see here. So I need to refine the edge of this mask. This is the quick selection tool did a reasonably good job here to begin with, but it's not completed the job for me. So I'm actually going to move the image over, and I'm going to go to work on this part up here. You need to make sure that you can still see the application frame behind, and we're going to select the next tool down, and the next tool down is the Refine Edge tool. Right now, before we actually do that, I want you to click on Show Edge. And if you click on the Show Edge, you will actually see that by default, there has been an edge has been made for you. This is another new feature of this Select and Match tool. This did not exist with Refine Edge. When you used Refine Edge, you would have... Say what? Did you click on Show Edge? And it doesn't look like that?
Are we still in onions?
Oh, you're not in Onion. You should be clicked down here on Layers.
Yeah, I mean, still doesn't. Yeah, it still doesn't look like that.
Really?
Should we be quick select or refine?
Drop down, you're on Layers. That part's correct. Now look at the thing. Oh, I take it back. Go back to Onion Skin really quick. Put and transparency. Everybody go back to Onion Skin. Put transparency. Now put it right in the middle. 50%. Okay, and then try to click on down on Layers. Great. You guys are in a newer version of Photoshop. Thank God they fixed it again. This may have been considered a bug for them. Oh, you've actually got another one here. You've got high quality preview. I don't have that. Click on high quality preview. See what happens. Huh. Okay. Well, everybody watch my screen then. I will figure out, we will redo this again with another file next week because they've changed this yet again. So at any rate, this did not used to be the case. You did not used to have this in this version of Photoshop, which is one behind yours. They've actually put it in. So at least you'll be able to understand how this guy is actually working. So the next tool down is actually the Refine Edge tool. Click on your Refine Edge tool and see if that changes anything. Does it? No?
I was in there.
Say what?
I was on.
You were on the Refine Edge tool, the second one down? All right, we'll figure out, like I say, I'll get some, figure it out yet again. All right, so at any rate, so with the Refine Edge tool picked, you've actually got a tool that will actually change how this edge works. So you can make the edge bigger or you can make it smaller. So you will see, I'm going to go back, I'm going to uncheck this Show Edge. The problem that I have got with this edge right here is that the edge itself that Photoshop added to this, or that the Refine tool is not big enough. it's too narrow. So again, I'm going to show you the edge right now. It's too narrow to actually get all of that. So I can change what that looks like. So I'm going to use the Refine Edge tool, this guy right here, and I'm going to simply click on it and drag it across this guy and all the way down till I get to the edge of the castle and let go. And you can see in some cases it's done a better job, in some cases not as good a job. If you click on Show Edge now, you will see that by using that brush, I've actually expanded the area. This is the thing that you need to know about Refine Edge. Refine Edge was something that was invented by a group of high school students, if you can believe that. Photoshop, Adobe saw it and bought it and put it into Photoshop. Refine Edge does one thing, and this is the one thing you've got to remember about Refine Edge, and you cannot let this, you can't forget this part. So at any rate, the Refine Edge tool does one thing. There's this algorithm that these kids wrote, and Photoshop either applies it to a part of your image or it doesn't. There's no strength slider. There's no 100%, down to 50. There's none of that. That does not exist. It either happens to it or it doesn't. You tell Photoshop where you want to run this algorithm and where you don't want to run it, and that's all that can happen. There's no repeating this. There's no doing it twice. There's no doing it 4 times. That will not help you at all. It's either you run it on an edge and it helps that edge, or it doesn't. It's that simple. Make sense? So try it. If it helps you out, great. If it doesn't help you out, don't use it. Make sense? But anyway, so this is actually happening, this part right down here. I personally think it did a really good job on the castle. To see your before and after in Photoshop, in this preview window, I'm going to turn off Show Edge. You click on Show Original. Show Original will actually take you back again, which is not helping me here. So I hate the way this part of the way they've actually made this guy work. But it's basically showing you what your edge should look like and then showing you in the composite. And you can say to yourself, oh, am I seeing this? Does this part work here? Is this correct? And the castle part, it actually does a really good job with. Again, I'm going to go back to the beach now. And the beach, I don't think it does a good job with. Again, if I show original on the dunes or whatever, I've got a white line that's actually happening here. And I think the problem that I'm having right here is that it is doing the Refine Edge on this. Again, if I show you the edge, it's this edge that's sitting right here. I don't think this algorithm should be being run on this edge. I think it's causing this white problem, this white line problem. So I want to remove the Refine Edge from that. To do remove Refine Edge, again, I've got the Refine Edge paintbrush right here, but instead of the plus, you click on the minus. Or if you've got the plus on, you can simply hold down the Option key and you will get the minus. You'll notice that the little symbol in the middle of the brush changes from a plus to a minus. So I'm simply going to click and drag along to paint this out. I'll show it to you what it actually looks like on the edge. Oh, so actually, again, hold down the minus tool and click, and it gets rid of that edge. So I'm not seeing that part there any longer. I'm going to zoom back out and go ahead and complete that entire process. So you'll see you can do it without doing just the show edge part right here. Sorry. And I'm just getting rid of this part right here. So the way the Refine Edge tool is really meant to work, you'll see right here, the part that Photoshop put in by itself is this guy right here. That's actually a radius tool slide, even though this radius has been set to 0. Photoshop put one in. This is where you used to be able to do exactly this work. I then added a larger radius to this area right here, and then finally I subtracted all of it from right here. To see what this ultimately looks like, you can see right here, this will be the original here that will show, and the one with sort of without. And then finally, in your output right here, this guy actually matters quite a bit. In the drop-down menu, you will have that you can actually output this as a new selection, as a refine of your layer mask, as a brand new layer, as a new layer with a new layer mask, as a new document, or a new document with a new mask. The issue with this is that you could do this as a new selection. There wouldn't really be much of a reason to. The new layer mask is what you do want to do. You actually do want to refine this guy. What all it's doing is refining that mask. You would not do a new layer. What a new layer will do is actually create a new layer. It'll create a new mask, but then it will apply that layer mask to it. I'm going to say this right now because everybody's going to fuck this up in this class. I'm going to let you fuck this up twice, and then I'm going to flunk you for every assignment that you continue to fuck it up on. Do not do not ever apply your layer masks. So everybody hold up their hand. Repeat after me. I state your name. Promise never to apply my layer masks. Okay, so now when you do, and I write you a really nasty comment on Moodle about it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Okay, so anyway, that's what would happen here automatically. You do not want that to happen. You could create a brand new layer with a new layer mask that's viable. You would not want to do a new document. That is exactly the same process. It'll create a brand new document. However, it will apply your layer masks, which you do not want to have done. However, you could create a new document with a new layer mask. All of which I'm just going to say right now, we're just going to refine our layer mask. And go ahead and say, it should be under output settings. Sorry.
So we're doing it with what?
So in your drop-down menu, the default should say layer mask. All right, are we good on this, guys? Oh, and what is it? So in your new one under edge detection, when you clicked on show edge, or were you doing this edge detection? Or by default, does it have 4 pixels in there? And then you got something? Got it. So they did fix this because this was actually wrong. So guys, look at mine right here. When so under edge detection, which is under all of these view modes, if you click on show edge, this radius right here was put on by default by Photoshop. That should never have been there because my edge radius was set at 0, and it sounds like they fixed it. So Joe just cranked his up to like 4 pixels. And then you should see a line that goes around everything. You can still use the brush to go in and refine that selection. And this is the other part of the Refine Edge tool. If you've got a really hard edge, like the castle on the sky, using this slider, the radius slider, is actually a very good thing to do. You can actually see how it works if you guys turn on Show Edge and then come down to this edge detection and take the radius slider and crank it up. You'll see that it'll actually make your slider. Oh, this is even weirder.
What if the dunes area still looks like
janky?
fine?
Yeah, we'll fix that in a later class.
Okay, so don't worry.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, so guys, I'll update this to the latest, greatest version of Photoshop, and we'll look at it next week in greater detail. But for the most part, this is how it's supposed to work. And again, one of the frustrating things about Photoshop is they fix something and inevitably give you a whole nother thing to learn. Okay, so anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and say okay to that. I would argue that my situation here is slightly better, but again, as Lindsay would point out, that she still has a problem with this edge work right in here. So I'll show you how to actually fix this in a later class. But you're gonna wanna know right now, aren't you? Okay. We'll do this right now. I'm going to do a quick down and dirty version of this because I need you guys to have faith in me that I really know what I'm doing and that you did sign up for this class and that it was a good reason to do that. Okay, I need everybody real quick, choking and spreading in really, really fast. So here we go. I need everybody to create a new file for me. Hold down the Command key and hit N. It'll bring up a dialog box. And I simply, usually when I do this, I make just an 8x10 image. So again, or 7x9 image. That part doesn't.
I've never seen this. They like just do this yesterday.
And they could have. So wait, you hit Command N. What happened? Oh God, I hate this. This is what they're trying to get it to start with as well. So anyway, just fine. You can leave the 7 by 5 inches in here at 300 ppi. Just go ahead and hit Create here, and we should be good to go. Yeah. All right, so at any rate, let me do that again for me. And again, so somewhere 8 by 10 inches, something close to that. I'm going to do a resolution of 300 ppi and go ahead and say okay to that. And I'll open up an image that looks something like this. Okay, so what I'd like everybody to do is come over to the rectangular marquee tool. It's the second tool down on the tool palette, and click rectangular marquee tool and come over. Make sure that again up at your options menu that your feathering is set to 0, that your style is at normal, and I simply want you to click and drag out. Say what? It's or the marquee tool. It's this thing right here. Look up at my screen. You can see. Oh, right here at in the options bar at the very top. Okay, so with this thing drug out, do you guys have rulers on the sides of your images? Okay, to get to the rulers, because you need the rulers to do this, to get to the rulers, come up to the view menu, down to rulers, and check, just enable rulers, and they'll show up. In my case, my rulers are set in pixels right now. You can change that, or whatever yours are. If you hold down the control key and you click on the ruler itself, you can change, you'll get a drop-down menu, and you can do it in pixels or inches. I'll change mine to inches, so it's a little bit more. Doesn't really matter though. But anyway, I've still got this selection going. If you then take your mouse and actually click on the top ruler and drag down, you'll pull down what they call a guideline. And if you get close to the bottom of this selection, it will snap to it. So I've got one guideline down there on the bottom of my image right now. I'm going to drag down a second one. Again, up to the ruler menu, click and drag down to the second one. And you will actually get another guideline that's now on the top. We need to do ones for both sides as well. So again, click and drag on the ruler that's on the left-hand side, drag across to snap to the right-hand side of the selection, and then finally one for the last one. So you should have 4 guidelines that are showing you exactly where your selection was. Does everybody have that? No, it doesn't. It can be any. No, it does not need to be square. So finally, I want to fill this. I'm on a white background. I want to fill this guy with black. Again, hit the D key to default your foreground and background colors to black and white. If white is your foreground color and black is your background color, hit the X key. Or in my case now that black is my background color, simply Command Delete will actually fill this thing with black. And then Command D to deselect. And so you should have a square or a rectangle shape of some kind that's actually got these guidelines that are perfectly bordered around this. Does everybody have that guy? Okay, so I need you to zoom into one of these edges right now. And I'm simply going to click. And again, I'm holding down the space bar and the command key that gives me the positive zoom tool. And I'm zooming in, and I'm just coming into this one corner. So you don't need to see the whole image. I'm just looking at the one upper left-hand corner of mine. So I am going to blur this image now. I'm going to come up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur. And I'm not going to blur at 41 pixels. I'm actually going to blur it like 5 pixels. That'll be a good number for me. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And what you can see has happened is this. This is really, really important, is to understand how the blur tool works. If you look at this image, remember, I had that black edge was right where that guideline was. What Photoshop has done in order to blur it is it has introduced levels of gray on the inside of that line, and it's also introduced levels of gray outside of that line. So what blurring really does is exactly that. It takes what was black, again, I'll undo mine so you can see it, what was black, and it introduces levels of gray. So here on the interior right in here, it still is pure black. You can tell it's pure black because the RGB readout up here in my info palette says 000. But as I start to move here and I'm starting to get close to that edge, you'll see that it starts to actually bump up. Look at my RGB in my info palette. Look at my info palette up here. You'll actually see that it starts to bump up, and I get into more positive values. And as I get higher and higher and higher, and I'm getting close to this edge, by the time I get right at that edge, it's close to a middle gray. And then as I continue in an outward motion out here, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter until I finally get to white out here. Does that make sense what's going on? All right, everybody good on that one, right? So, can I change those values?
Yeah.
How do I change it? How do I change tonality in Photoshop? Curves will do it. What else will do it? Levels will also do it, right? And so how do curves and levels really work? What do? They remap tone, right? So I can say, when I put a level on there, I can say, take these midtones and make them darker. Or take these midtones and make them lighter. Or I can say, take the really light tones and make them dark. I mean, I'm controlling tone just like that, right? Very simple levels, right? So I can use levels to change these tones as well. Does that make sense? And it works like this. If you hit Command L to bring up the levels dialog box, you will actually see that there's not much of a histogram going. That's because your image is primarily black and white. However, there are a small number of tones, and it's these tones that are running right here. What you'll notice is this. Watch my screen. Don't do this. Watch my screen, and then I'll get you guys to do it. This is my black point right here. If I click and drag this and start to slide it up, what I'm telling Photoshop that I want to do is I want you to take all the tones that are in here and make them black. Make sense? Well, what that's saying is that all of these tones in here, I want Photoshop to make these guys black. And watch what happens to my selection. So I'm going to click and drag up, and you see it starts to push my selection outside of the line. And by the time I get up here, I have actually pushed this black area beyond those original guidelines, right? Well, imagine this is your mask. You can control, you can expand and contract your mask. In printing, that's called choking and spreading, which I always thought was, should be a menu item at the local, never mind. So anyway, so raising that point up like this is actually called a spread because you're actually causing that image to spread out. If you drag this all the way back down and instead you grab the highlight slider and start to pull it in, you will notice that your mask, or in this case here, we're calling this a mask, that this actually gets smaller. Because again, what we're saying is take those middle tones of gray and make them white. So in effect, we are choking this mask. Does that make sense what's going on here? All right, so if you've done all that, you can click cancel out of here. You can close this guy up. You do not need to save it. We can actually choke and spread this mask area right here. So do you guys all have a white line that's on the beach? Okay, we're not going to do the whole thing right now because, again, this is all supposed to come up later. But I'm going to go after just this center section of the mask right here. Make sure that you do have your mask selected. I'm going to take the L key, which just gives me the lasso tool, and I'm simply going to select this area of the dunes. And you don't need to be, you just need to make sure you're selecting a big part of it. So as far as that part goes. So I've selected this part of the dunes here, right here, like this. Again, I'm on the mask. So I'm going to come up to, again, the filter menu, down to blur. And the amount that you pick for blur will vary depending on the image. So in some images, if they're really high-res images, you need a higher blur. In some images, you need a not as high a blur. You'll see in the case of this, the dialog box is sticky. It brings up, again, 5 pixels in this. I think that's a little too extreme on this. You'll see that the problem got worse. That is how it's supposed to happen. So I'm going to drag this down to not make it quite that extreme. I'm going to come down to like a, let's say like a 4. Let's do that. That seems about right to me. Again, if this doesn't work the first time, then we'll actually go back. We'll undo it in history and go back and do it again. There's no hardcore rules for this. You just got to, it's just something you'll develop a taste for. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. I've still got that active selection going. If you look, if you want to see the mask itself, hold down the hold down the Option key and click on your mask, and you'll actually see just the mask, and you'll see the blur that we just did. This is now, and again, this may be a little bit too strong of a blur, but we'll find out right now. So that's what I've just done. To go back to the mask, simply hold down the Option key again and click on it. So I'm going to do, again, I'm going to choke this. So Command L will bring up the levels dialog box. And in our case, I'm going to, and I never remember which one of these to do. I don't remember whether you grab the black one and drag it up or the white one and drag it down, but we'll see on this. So I'm going to grab the black one and I'm going to start to drag it up. That would actually be a spread. That's making my problem worse. So I'm going to drag it all the way back down again, and I'm going to grab the white point slider at the top, and I'm going to click it and drag it back down, and now I've actually choked this guy in. Now, some people would say, well, but you've pulled the line down too much, and that's the reason I've pulled this down is this edge is still really soft. There's not a lot of contrast in this edge. So you can fix that now by going after the black point and click on it and drag it to push it up again, and you will narrow down that line, and you can actually tweak it out to the final point, and that's going to seem reasonably good for mine right now. And that is the difference in a choke and spread. Again, I would probably go back. Actually, I will go back. Let's go back and I'm just going back in history to the lasso tool for the first one. I'm going to blur this a little bit less. So instead of that 4 blur, I'm going to come up to the Gaussian blur back again. Let's try a 2 instead of a 4 in there. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. Command L to bring up the lasso the levels dialog box and start to pull the choke back down, and that actually seems a little bit better to me, and possibly pop the spread up just a touch like that. And now you guys should be going, God, I don't believe this. He really does know what he's doing. Are there questions about this? Okay, so far in this class, at this stage of the game, half of you have got to be going, when the fuck are we going to use the clone stamp tool and select hair? I signed up for retouching and compositing, and this idiot is showing me nothing but smart objects. He's having me process this castle thing, and I don't give a shit about the castle thing anyway. It's a mediocre image at best, and what is up with all this? All I can say to you is, please, please, please bear with me in all of this. This will begin to make sense. I think, and just as the teaser here, I think, let me check and make sure really quickly here. We do hair next week. Complex hair next week. So we are moving in the direction where this wants to go. But the other thing I will say to you is this right now. There is, well, depending on how many people were left or still from my class last semester that are here still at Columbia College, there was 15 in that class. At the most, there's 15 people in this school that know how to do this. There are, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say maybe 10, 15, 20% of the retouchers in the world know how to do this. You guys now know how to do this. So you go in for your retouching audition, and you look at them and they say, wow, can you use the, decontaminate the mask thing, whatever, and you look at them and you say, you should really just choke this thing. You have a whole lot more control on it, and let me show you how to do this really quick, whatever. And they are just going to look at you and go, where did you learn that? Yeah. You guys just know, I'm just telling you right now, the advanced part, which I never understood, advanced retouching and compositing, because it's not like there was a beginning one, right? Or what's the opposite of advanced? The basic? There was no basic advanced, So yeah, exactly, right?
They're like, what's the one before advanced? I was like,
Yeah. I had no hand in all of that. I just want to say here, not my call. I didn't name any of this. I wrote the class, but I didn't name it. So at any rate, but this is clearly massively advanced work for you guys right now. We are leaving now. The training wheels are coming off. We're heading into the big time. Are there questions about this guy? Okay. You can save your work. You can actually, if you want to, which would be interesting to do, to finish this file off for me, because you're going to turn this in next week, go ahead and finish refining, doing choking and spreading on the rest of this image, if you would. That would be great.
Can you do it? Should you do it section by section? Based on the...
Again, we're a little bit ahead of the game right now. We get into choking and spreading in a much bigger way, and I'm going to show you a way to actually gild the lily on top of that gives you control to go back and forth. But I don't want to go down that road right now because we got too much other stuff to actually do. All right, then. So finally, in this whole world of smart objects and all the stuff that we've actually talked about, I told you that in this case, it's impossible to actually work directly on these smart objects. You cannot do that any longer. So I'm going to double click on the hand icon to get my image to jump back to where it was ultimately was supposed to be, so I can see it full screen. If you want to actually do some cloning and stamping on this, you've got to actually then turn this into a normal image, as it were. There's a couple of ways of actually doing this. In my case, if you only wanted to work on, let's say you only wanted to, let's see what you wanted to do. Oh, I'm just going to show this to you. So you need to turn this into a normal conventional layer. You can't do it with a smart object. Again, if you hit the S key, which is the clone stamp tool, and you click on, you can clone the mask. The mask you can actually do cloning work on. You can paint on the mask. But if you click the smart object itself and you know the smart object is active because it's got the little brackets around it, you will notice that you can't, if you hit the B key, that's the brush, you can't paint on it. The S key is the clone stamp tool, you can't clone on that kind of stuff. You can't do any of that stuff. So in order for us to actually work on this image, once we get to this stage of the game, you feel good about your processing, you like the way this looks. Did we talk about how do you finesse this before I actually go to this part? If you feel like the sky is too dark, did we talk about this at all? Yeah, you would actually use the opacity slider right here. However, it's possible that you could double click on this to open it back up and open up your exposure sum. So instead of a -1.5, you could actually open this guy up to like a -1.5 and say, okay, and your sky would be a little bit lighter. The problem with that is that you can never see what you're doing when you're in Camera Raw, in the develop part of Camera Raw. You can never see it in conjunction with the first layer that's establishing the ground. That's why I actually find the opacity slider to be easier to work with, because I can see this as a total composite now, as opposed to just trying to guess and continually going back and forth and reprocessing. Oh, a little bit lighter. Oh, a little bit darker. Oh, a little bit lighter. Anyway, so, but now I do want to do some cloning work on it. So to do this, I want you to select the very top layer, make it active. This is the most complex of the keyboard shortcuts that I will ever talk to you about in this class. And that keyboard shortcut is this. So you need to make sure that you've got the top layer selected. You need to hold down the Command key, the Option key, the Shift key, and the letter E. And when you do that, you will get a merged stamp version of all the files that were visible. Now,
Command Option.
yeah, I'll show you. I'll tell you again. I'll tell you again. So let me just hit Command Z to undo mine. So the Command key, which is right to the left of the space bar. The Option key, which is just to the left of it. The Shift key, which is to the left and up one row. And the letter E for Engelhard. No, E for, I don't know what the E's for. But at any rate, everything. There you go. And it will give you a merge stamp version of this. You will notice that this merge stamp version is not got a little icon down at the bottom. So it is not a smart object. So you can actually paint on this guy and clone on this guy. So again, pick the paintbrush tool and you can paint white on this guy. Again, I'm down at a 30% opacity, so I can paint white on this guy. So you can now actually work on the image. This is actually the process. What we actually did here was just rasterize 2 layers. So what does rasterize actually mean? Well, I'll show you what it means. I'm going to throw that guy away that we just did. And I'm going to simply duplicate the sky layer by simply dragging it down right now. Now, this has made a legitimate clone. Again, this is a clone. Now, we did not do that. Remember, if you want to make an independent copy of your raw data, you've got to come up to Layer, down to Smart Object, New Smart Object via Copy. If you simply do a drag down here with this guy, it makes a clone and a true clone, and anything that we do in this guy is actually going to be, will affect both of them. However, you can change this guy back to a normal layer. To do that, you come up to this select menu again, down to Smart Objects, and down at the very bottom is this thing that says Rasterize. And if you let go, you will see that that little icon disappears. This has now been, you've now baked this image. It used to be raw data. It's no longer a true clone of this